The Gullah Geechee are a subgroup of the African American ethnic group who predominantly live in the Low Country region of the United States of North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida within the coastal plain and the Sea Islands. Their language and culture have preserved a significant influence of Africanisms as a result of their historical geographic isolation and the community's relation to its shared history and identity. Historically, the Gullah region extended from the Cape Fear area of North Carolina's coast south to the vicinity of Jacksonville on Florida's coast. The Gullah people in their language are also called Geechee, which may be derived from the name of the Ogeechee River near Savannah, Georgia. Gullah is a term that was originally used to designate the Creole dialect of English spoken by Gullah and Geechee people. Over time, its speakers have used this term to formally refer to their Creole language and distinctive ethnic identity as a people. The Georgia communities are distinguished by identifying as either freshwater Geechee or saltwater Geechee, depending on whether they live on the mainland or the Sea Islands. Because of a period of relative isolation from whites while working on large plantations in rural areas, the Africans, enslaved from a variety of Central and West African ethnic groups, developed a Creole culture that has preserved much of their African linguistic and cultural heritage from various peoples. In addition, they absorbed new influences from the region. According to the Gullah Geechee Nation website, many Gullah Geechees also have some Native American or Indigenous American ancestry. The Gullah people speak an English-based Creole language containing many African loanwords and influenced by African languages in grammar and sentence structure. Sometimes referred to as Sea Island Creole by linguists and scholars. The Gullah language is sometimes considered as being similar to Bahamian Creole, Barbadian Creole, Guyanese Creole, Belizean Creole, Jamaican Patois, Trinidadian Creole, Tobagoan Creole, and the Sierra Leone Creole language of West Africa. Gullah crafts, farming, and fishing traditions, folk beliefs, music, rice-based cuisine, and storytelling traditions all exhibit strong influences from Central and West African cultures. The Gullah people have been able to preserve much of their African cultural heritage because of climate, geography, cultural pride, and patterns of importation of enslaved Africans. By the middle of the 18th century, thousands of acres in the Georgia and South Carolina Low Country and the Sea Islands were developed as African rice fields. African farmers from the Rice Coast brought the skills for cultivation and tidal irrigation that made rice farming one of the most successful industries in early America. The subtropical climate encouraged the spread of malaria and yellow fever, which were both carried and transmitted by mosquitoes. These tropical diseases were endemic in Africa and might have been carried by enslaved Africans to the colonies. Mosquitoes in the swamps and inundated rice fields of the Low Country picked up and spread the disease to European settlers as well. Because they had acquired some immunity in their homeland, Africans were more resistant to these tropical fevers than were the Europeans. As the rice industry was developed, planters continued to import enslaved Africans. By about 1708, South Carolina had a black majority. Coastal Georgia developed a black majority after rice cultivation expanded there in the mid-18th century. Malaria and yellow fever became endemic. Fearing these diseases, many white planters and their families left the Low Country during the rainy spring and summer months when fevers ran rampant. The planters left their European or African rice drivers or overseers in charge of the rice plantations. These had hundreds of laborers, with African traditions reinforced by new imports from the same regions. Over time, the Gullah Geechee people developed a Creole culture in which elements of African languages, cultures, and community life were preserved to a high degree. Their culture developed in a distinct way, different from that of the enslaved African Americans in the states such as North Carolina, Virginia, and Maryland, where the slave lived in smaller groups and had more sustained and frequent interactions with whites in British American culture. In late 2024, underwater sonar was used to map 45 previously unknown irrigation devices used to control water flow for the rice fields in conjunction with earth dams and levees. Developed by the Gullah Geechee over 2,000 acres of the northern end of Eagles Island, North Carolina, U.S., this provided evidence of the Gullah Geechee engineering and technological skills used for rice cultivation. When the U.S. Civil War began, the Union rushed to blockade Confederate shipping. White planters on the Sea Islands, fearing an invasion by the U.S. naval forces, abandoned their plantations and fled to the mainland. When Union forces arrived on the Sea Islands in 1861, they found the Gullah people eager for their freedom and eager as well to defend it. Many Gullah served with distinction in the Union Army's 1st South Carolina Colored Infantry Regiment. The Sea Islands were the first place in South where slaves were freed. Long before the war ended, Unitarian missionaries from Pennsylvania came to start schools on the islands for the newly freed slaves. Penn Center, now a Gullah community organization on St. Helena Island, South Carolina, was founded as the first school for freed slaves. After the Civil War ended, the Gullah's isolation from the outside world increased in some respects. The rice planters on the mainland gradually abandoned their plantations and moved away from the area because of labor issues and hurricane damage to crops. Free blacks were unwilling to work in the dangerous and disease-ridden rice fields. A series of hurricanes devastated the crops in the 1890s. Left alone in remote rural areas of the Low Country, the Gullah continued to practice their traditional culture with little influence from the outside world well into the 20th century. In the late 20th century, some plantations were redeveloped as resort or hunting destinations by wealthy white Americans. Gradually, more visitors went to the islands to enjoy their beaches and mild climate. Since the late 20th century, the Gullah people, led by Penn Center and other determined community groups, have been fighting to keep control of their traditional lands. Since the 1960s, resort development on the Sea Islands greatly increased, property values threatening to push the Gullah off family lands which they have owned since emancipation. They have fought back against uncontrolled development on the islands through community action, the courts, and the political process. The Gullah have also struggled to preserve their traditional culture in the face of much more contact with modern culture and media. The Gullah have preserved many of their West African food ways, growing and eating crops such as Sea Island red peas, Carolina gold rice, Sea Island benet, Sea Island okra, sorghum, and watermelon, all of which were brought with them from West Africa. Rice is a staple in Gullah communities and continues to be cultivated in abundance in the coastal regions of Georgia and South Carolina. Rice is also an important food in West African cultures. As descendants of enslaved Africans, the Gullah continue the traditional food and food techniques of their ancestors, demonstrating another link to traditional African cultures. Rice is a core commodity of the Gullah food system. A meal was not considered complete without rice. There are strict rituals surrounding the preparation of rice in the Gullah communities. First, individuals will remove the darker grains from the rice and then hand wash the rice numerous times before it was ready for cooking. The Gullah people would add enough water for the rice to steam on its own, but not so much that one would have to stir or drain it. These traditional techniques were passed down during the period of slavery and are still an important part of rice preparation by Gullah people. Over the years, the Gullah have attracted study by many historians, linguists, folklorists, and anthropologists interested in their rich cultural heritage. Many academic books on that subject have been published. The Gullah have also become a symbol of cultural pride for blacks throughout the United States and a subject of general interest in the media. Numerous newspaper and magazine articles, documentary films, and children's books on Gullah culture have been produced in addition to popular novels set in the Gullah region. Gullah people now organize cultural festivals every year in towns up and down the low country. Gullah culture has proven to be particularly resilient. Gullah traditions are strong in the rural areas of the low country mainland and on the sea islands and among their people in urban areas such as Charleston and Savannah.